Vampire.
Yes. It became international bestseller. Established that notion of vampires being like charming aristocrats. So you're thinking of like Lestat and Louis and all that stuff.
And Vlad.
And yes, and that's where Bram Stoker got inspiration for Dracula 70 years later. So near the end of their stay, Claire tells Byron that she's pregnant, and the asshole that he is says, "Is the brat mine?" Which, nice. Come on, ass. And I think everyone must have looked at him like,
ass hat.
You're a dink. Like, this is your kid. So he says, "Yes, I promise I will care for this child, blah, 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 blah." And
which really means nothing, because he doesn't have to keep his promise.
No, he doesn't. Because he's a man. No one cares.
Especially back then.
So this gathering was probably one of the most influential gathering of infamous writers in English literature history. So nice. It was like a big thing, and they took side trips at that time to different.
It's funny though, like
places.
Like the two, like famous poets that were there are not the ones who became famous. Who didn't? They're not. They were overshadowed by the other.
They were,
works of arts, which is awesome. But
right.
The two non-writers.
Non-writers, yeah. The one they made fun of, which he probably deserved it because he was creepy. He was making unwanted advances. So yes. I don't. If he didn't do that, maybe I would feel bad for him, but I don't. Yeah. So I want to go on about Mary Shelley's life and the rest of the characters from this, because it's very interesting what happens to them all after this summer together. And Mary Shelley had a rough time, but she's a badass. And I just want to talk about her because I love badass women. They returned to England late 1816. And then that's when Percy's wife, remember, he was married and he took off and left her with 2 children. She committed suicide. She drowned herself nice. At 21 years old. And the reason why she did it, this is so sad. She got pregnant. She had found a lover while he was gone, and she got pregnant by that guy. And she felt like she dishonored her family. And she killed herself because of it. She was advanced in pregnancy. She took off. She was missing for like 2 months because I don't know if she knew what she wanted to do. And she wrote a goodbye letter. It's horrible and sad, and it's his fault. It's his fault. It's his fault because he left her. It's his fault.
It's just heartbreaking.
Percy was like, he was going to get custody of his 2 children. And the lawyer said that, it'd look better if you were married to a woman because no one's going to give a dad who hasn't been with his kids any children. So he and Mary got married, which he should marry Mary because he has a child with her now too, and her at this point, Mary's father and her start talking, and he attends the wedding, which makes Mary very happy because she was very close with her dad, and Percy kind of became a wedge between them. So Mary and her father mend their differences at that time. Marrying Mary did not help Percy because everyone knew Percy was a dirtbag.
Yeah. He's not going to change
all
his
he
spots.
Spent money on is opium and wrote poems. That's all he did. And the courts were like, no, these kids are going to go to someone else. So I think they went to a family member of the mom.
Right.
Because you can't have those children. And thank God, because those kids would not have had a good life. Okay, because listen to this.
Yeah.
So we're going on now. I have this all written funny because I was like rewriting and like moving things around. Hold on. I'm trying to remember what I wanted to read next. Okay, so at this time they moved to Bath because they wanted to keep Claire's pregnancy a secret. She's not married. She's pregnant, and they're trying to hide that. Claire ends up giving birth to her daughter, Allegra, January 13th of 1818. And another big thing that happened in January 8, the summer of 1817, Mary finished Frankenstein.
Right.
So she finished writing it. So in January of 1818, it got published. Frankenstein, the modern Prometheus, anonymously published. Anonymously put out there.
Because people wouldn't buy a book written by a woman because women don't know anything.
Now the story has elements from the Gothic and Romantic periods, and it's just right up everyone's alley. And it has all these things in it that like the new science things that are coming out, talking all these things are part of what's going on in the world, so it really caused a big stir. But many assume Percy wrote it because he wrote the preface of the book and he dedicated it to his political hero, William Godwin, which was Mary's father.
Right.
With that being in there, everyone just assumed he really did write this book. Like, come on. March of 18, they were fearing debt again because, Percy can't keep his shit together.
No, and he's got to smoke his opium.
And he's spending all their money, and all these things are happening, and they're really, really worried that they're going to lose custody of their children because he couldn't get custody of his kids. Now Claire has a baby, and they have a baby. Are they going to take our kids from us? And Claire is not married. So they all are like really worried about this. So they decide we're leaving. We're out of here. And Percy had wrote a letter to Lord Byron saying, Mary's kind of mad too because she is worried that people are going to think that Claire's baby's Percy's, and she doesn't like that look on her. I don't want that in my house. So she's upset. She's saying that the child don't like each other, and that she doesn't like the fact that people think Percy might be the dad. So they contact Lord Byron. We're like, you need to do something. This is your child. So he says that, sure, bring Allegra to me in Italy. I will care for Allegra.
Not Claire.
But I don't want Claire to be a part of it. But Claire, worried that she can't provide a good life for her child, agrees to do it. Because she's like, I have no money. I live with Percy Shelley, who can't keep his shit together and has no money either. And we're just bouncing around. So she agrees because Byron has money. Percy's family has money. But they cut him off when he wrote a thing about God not being true. And They said that at a certain time, he could get the money, but he can't have it now. So he will get money eventually. He just can't have it yet.
But he's still living like he has
But
money.
he's living like he has the money, and he doesn't. So after they dropped Allegra off with Byron, Claire tried one last time to try to win over Byron. It didn't work. I feel so bad for Claire, really. It's sad. So they leave Byron with Allegra, and they're just bouncing all over Italy. Meeting people, sightseeing, they're socializing, they're writing more stuff. Percy's writing lots of poetry, but he's probably really messed up on opium the whole time he's gone.
Those poetry's probably all weird, effed up.
And then, at some point in this time, I forgot to say that Claire gave birth
to Allegra.
No, Claire gave birth to Allegra, and then in September of the same year, she's pregnant.
Again.
By Percy.
Oh, nice.
Shelley, Mary Shelley's pregnant by Percy.
Oh, okay. Not Claire.
No.
Okay.
So they're all, so she had her baby in September that year named Clara. So she has a boy and a girl now. Okay. Sorry. I got all mixed up in my head. So, they're traveling all around. They have babies. She has a baby and how the boy's probably a young child, like 3. And they're traveling everywhere. Sadly, while they're running around in Italy, both of her children died.
What?
Clara, September of 1818 in Venice, and William in 1819 in Rome of malaria. Both children got malaria and died.
Oh, that's horrible.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Poor Mary. Obviously, this sent Mary into a deep depression. She lost her first child within 2 weeks of being born. She loses her 2 other children, and she is just a mess. And she's isolated herself from Percy because she really is blaming him.
I would.
Because she says, we came to Italy to improve my husband's health, which was his mental health, basically. And instead, the Italian climate killed my 2 children. And she's so upset. She took comfort in writing. They both were during this time of depression, and he was sad and all upset about it too. He loved his children. He just was a freaking asshole and couldn't get his shit together. So they both of them were writing a lot during this time. They were very, very creative. But a lot of times when people are upset and depressed, that's their way of coping. But she also had to cope with the fact that Percy couldn't keep it in his pants. So she's home, grieving over the death of her children. He's out banging all these girls. So, nice. I mean, she believed in free love, but she was just done with this. She's like, I'm done. This is ridiculous. In her grief, she wrote The Fields of Fancy, which she changed the name to Matilda. And this story is horrifying. She wrote a story about this young girl who's so beautiful, her father falls in love with her. Her father. And he ends up killing himself so he won't act upon it. And she lives her life in despair for the rest of her days of guilt for being so beautiful. And then is tormented in her afterlife. And it was all about, like, the patriarchy of society. And she was, like, basically sticking it to the man in it and saying how horrible it was, society for women, which is really cool. And a lot of times people didn't realize, she got a lot of credit for being a writer in her lifetime, as you'll see as they go on. But they didn't catch all the political stuff that she had in her.
Right.
Because they were stupid. And she was smart. So she writes that. In the summer of 1822, they move with Claire's with them still. Percy and Claire and her move to an isolated villa at the sea's edge. This is when Claire finds out that Byron broke his promise to care for the child and sent her off to a convent.
Nice.
Now, the child was maybe 3. And then she finds out that not only did he send her to a convent, that she caught typhus while there and she died.
Oh.
So this little girl dies. So Claire is now she gave her child up. The child would still be alive if she had. Well, maybe not. She got malaria with the other 2 kids. Right. Who knows? It's awful. Now,
what a horrible time to live.
I know.
Oh my God.
Percy,
you romanticize it, but
it was not good.
The harsh reality of it was pretty horrible.
Now, the coast offered Percy to do his favorite thing. Percy loved sailing. And he was he loved the water. He loved sailing. He was out in the boat all the time. Percy never learned how to swim, even though he loved the water. And him and his friend, Edward Williams, were going on a trip, and they never reached their destination because there was a big storm. And then the boat sank. And Percy drowned because he didn't know how to swim. And it was storming, too, so he probably wouldn't have anyway.
If you don't know how to swim, then don't go out in a boat.
Yeah. So this is, what date was this? July 8th, 1822.
Honestly,
Percy Shelley dies.
Even if he knew how to swim, he might not have lived anyway.
No. And he was, because it was storming. So he was, 26 or 27 or something when he died. A year before this, Dr. Polidori, the one that wrote Vampire and Dr. P, got into a lot of gambling debt and committed suicide by drinking acid.
Why would you do that?
So that was 1821. He died.
Oh, is it like, I want to die in the worst, most horrible way possible?
Yeah, let me drink acid. He's a doctor. You know what that's going to do. And he was only 26. So at this point, he's 26. He was famous for writing this novel, and he drinks acid.
Like, I just think there's, like, if you're going to do yourself in, there's better ways to do it than drinking acid.
Yeah. And Percy, like, people have said that they think Percy was in such a state of depression because Mary had kind of pushed him away and his children died that he put a hole in his boat. I don't think he did that. He was he liked himself way too much. And I think he was in a storm and he just couldn't survive it. Mary said when she found out, she trembled a lot. She was madly in love with Percy, even though she was very upset with him. And she kind of get mad at him for all the things. But she was, like, just full in love with him with all her heart. She just loved Percy. She was pregnant, mind you. So this was July. He died. She's pregnant. She gives birth to her child, Percy Florence. Thank God young Percy, survives.
But maybe he survives because his father is dead.
Yeah. Mary resolved at this point to live by her pen and for her son. Like, that's all she needed was to write and be a mother. She wanted to do. So she goes back to England. She's like,
poor kid's name is Percy Florence.
Yeah, Percy Florence Shelley.
Terrible. That is terrible. And his last name is Shelley too. That's just like.
Yeah, but back then it probably wasn't a thing.
Percy Florence Shelley. That just sounds like the kid that gets beat up every day at school. That's awful.
The third or something.
Horrible.
She goes back to England. She stays with her father for a while. Then she ends up getting her own place. All these poems that Percy has been writing have not been published. A lot of the ones on their trips and stuff. So she starts editing the poems. And she dedicated her time as being a mother and an author and doing these things. In 1923, she republishes Frankenstein with her name on it. 1823.
Wait,
sorry.
She's like over 100.
No, 1823. So this is just a year later. She republishes Frankenstein and puts her name on it. Which, go girl, yes.
Yes,
and people still loved it. There was edits. There's some edits in it, and they think Percy actually did the edits for it. he did a lot of help with her after the first publication of what, like, things